We have a $500 billion opportunity over the next decade to get our natural resources to market. And I think what we've all learned that if you do not respect the rights of Indigenous peoples, if you do not protect the environment, if you do not listen to concerns, good projects simply won't go ahead. Unfortunately, Conservative politicians have been fighting us at every turn.
That was Federal Environment Minister Catherine McKenna last night as the Senate passed controversial bill C-69. The legislation will overhaul the federal environmental assessment process for major resource projects like pipelines. The Senate proposed more than 200 amendments to the bill, but the government accepted 99. So how will Alberta respond now that C-69 is the law of the land? Jason Kenney is the Premier of Alberta. He joins us now from Edmonton. Hi, Premier Kenney. Great to see you again.
Good to see you.
So I heard your press conference a little earlier in which you expressed your disappointment that Bill C-69 had passed, but specifically your disappointment in senators from Alberta who had voted to pass Bill C-69 last night. You said that you're going to introduce legislation to bring back sort of like an election for Alberta senators. I'm wondering, though, how effective that will be. It appears to me like the federal government would not have to listen to that.
Well, all I can tell you is that we have elected senators representing Alberta in the Senate, 2 of them, and they were elected according to our now lapsed election law. And both of them supported Alberta's economic interests at every step of the way on both the attack on Alberta Oil Bill C-48 and the No More Pipelines Act Bill C-69, but some of the appointed senators did not. That underscores the obvious lesson that people with a direct line of accountability to the voters are more likely to vote in the interests of those electors. So that's why we're going to renew the Alberta Senate Election Act. Obviously, the Prime Minister can choose who he appoints to the Senate. We would encourage him to choose people chosen by the people of Alberta, which has happened, I think, 5 or 6 times in the past.
What's the point, though, of introducing the legislation if the Prime Minister is not bound by it? Is it just symbolic?
Well, who knows? There could be a new Prime Minister in October, November, who does respect Senate elections as to use his discretion to choose from the list of people elected. And perhaps Prime Minister Trudeau will change his mind. Prime Minister Mulroney did when this was first brought in back in 1989. He was initially against it, but he bent to the will of Albertans and appointed Senator Stan Waters 30 years ago. But this is not about the Senate so much. I'm just trying to make a statement that we want accountability from our senators. This was the Trudeau government deciding to do this. I want to commend the senators for having initially put in 188 constructive amendments to the Bill C-69, including those brought forward by the former NDP government of Alberta and industry groups. And I want to commend the Senate Transport Committee for having recommended that Bill C-48 be scrapped because it's nothing but an indefensible and prejudicial attack against Alberta's major export, our bitumen.
Let me ask you more specifically about Bill C-69. You wanted the government to accept all of the amendments. They did accept 99 of them. I've gone through most of them. They address in substance a lot of what you were concerned about. They reduce the power of the Minister of Environment. They increase the power of provinces. They give more certainty to timelines. Why isn't that enough? Just because they didn't come from Conservative senators?
No, Vashti, I'm sorry that the premise of your question is to accept the spin of the Liberal government that this is about a partisan question. It's not. I wrote a joint letter signed by the leaders of the NDP, the Liberal Party, the Alberta Party, representing 98% of Alberta voters. 9 of 10 provinces have opposed this bill in its final form. Virtually every major national industry group, dozens of First Nations. So it's completely disingenuous of Minister McKenna to try to dismiss all of this as some kind of a partisan scrap. It's not. There is massive opposition to this bill because in its final form it represents huge investor uncertainty. No definable timelines at the end of the day can be stopped at any point by the minister, allows wide open, endless gaming of the system by foreign funded interests making interventions. It retains the possibility of political intervention, and for us it unacceptably interferes in our exclusive constitutional jurisdiction to regulate our own natural resources. That's Section 92A of the Constitution. It was a hard-fought win by Premier Lougheed. He never would have signed on to the Constitution back then had it not been for that power, which is now directly attacked by Bill C-69, which is why we'll be challenging it in court.
With respect, though, C-69 with 188 amendments, would it not have infringed on that principle that you just described anyway? And yet you said if they did accept all those amendments, you would support the bill.
No, it corrected that. And in fact, the 188 amendment package adopted by the Senate included all of the amendments put forward by the government of Alberta, under the NDP, by the way, plus all of the amendments brought forward by the petroleum producers and the pipeline associations. For us, it was minimally acceptable. The point is, the original version of this bill was just so grossly unbalanced, and most of the major constructive amendments have been thrown out. Look, here's my point, Vashi. We were willing to show some compromise, some give and take on this by accepting an amended version of a bill that we fundamentally disagreed with, but they've really gone back to something that is unacceptable. It creates a massive uncertainty, and the energy industry continues to say that there will be no major pipelines proposed in the future because of the uncertain outcome of this new environmental assessment process. And that
how do you know?
means
Sorry to
all
interrupt,
of our eggs are
sorry
in.
to interrupt, Premier, but how do you know that that's going to be the case? In the past, if you look at the way environmental assessment has worked in the past in this country, it's not been to block projects. Most projects have ended up going ahead.
Well, actually, Vashi, the opinion I just quoted is from the Canadian Energy Pipeline Association that represents the pipeline companies. It's also been confirmed by the Petroleum Producers Association. So the industry is not willing to risk billions of dollars of shareholder money on pipelines with such an uncertain future. That's what happened to Energy East. After TransCanada had spent $1 billion in 6 years on that project, they pulled out in part because the National Energy Board imposed a mandate to account for up and downstream emissions, which mandate is now enshrined in law in Bill C-69. It's a standard they don't know how to meet. It's so uncertain. So what this does, according to the industry, according to the folks who need to put up that kind of risk capital, they're saying they're out of this forever, and that leaves us with one faint hope of one project that continues to face significant opposition. That, of course, is Trans Mountain.
Okay, before I let you go, I want to switch topics and ask you about something your critics are talking about. You passed out earplugs on Wednesday night during a debate on your government's Public Sector Wage Arbitration Deferral Act. During the campaign, you had said you wanted to, quote, raise the bar of civility and decorum in the legislature. How does handing out earplugs do that, Premier?
We have done that. In fact, I sat through 18 hours respectfully listening to an opposition filibuster, as did our caucus. We have no heckling, no desk thumping, virtually no applause. We have, I think, the best behaved caucus, and unfortunately it's not being reciprocated. So yeah, we had a member with tinnitus who was sitting next to a opposition member who was shouting repeatedly, clocked at nearly 100 decibels. So yeah, I gave him a pair of earplugs to reduce the volume that was coming from, and you know what, when we face that kind of out of control shouting in the legislature, I don't begrudge our MLAs trying to turn down the volume a notch. While some NDP MLAs, by the way, were wearing earbuds, like presumably listening to music. I can tell you from the House of Commons, I've been through 2 or 3 night filibusters. A lot of people listening to their iPads and music and with earplugs in to try to keep their kind of mental sanity over a 2 or 3 day filibuster. Nothing new about that, as our speaker ruled here. That's just, but here's the point. On that bill, we're just trying to ensure we have adequate information before we get into the next round of collective bargaining on agreements that represent about half of our expenditures, because we've got to balance the budget.
I just want to be clear, though. You said you only handed out 1 pair. The opposition is saying you handed out multiple pairs, and they called it disrespectful.
I think to about 10. Of course, they call it, the NDP opposition here is the perpetual outrage machine. In this same debate, they accused us of this modest labor bill being equivalent to slavery. They've accused us.
They apologized for saying that, if I recall.
The most ridiculous things. No, they did not. And so here's the point. We are showing the highest level of decorum, probably of any legislature in the country, and the government caucus here. Proud of our MLAs for doing that.
You truly think handing out those earplugs, though? They're saying it's making light of a very serious debate. I take your point on where you stand on the bill. They obviously have a different point on the bill. They thought it was, in contrary,
I don't think it's any
different than what you had said.
I think only this is just silly. I think, as far as I know, one of our MLAs, somebody with tinnitus, sitting next to a guy who was shouting all night, used the earplugs, while NDP MLAs were wearing earbuds, presumably listening to music, about which we have not raised. With the kind of issues we're discussing, I can't believe that this is being talked about. This is just silliness.
Okay, Premier Kenney, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video. Thanks for watching.